Angle or two on coronavirus tonight.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
So we are really trying to stretch it out, getting as much information as we can on this coronavirus crisis that we have now defined by the World Health Organization as a true pandemic across the planet. And that's a scary word, right? But what it means is that the epidemic is worldwide. It's about as simple as that. I was out and about today. People seem to be wary, but doing their thing. Did a little shopping. Folks were in the stores, stopped for a cup of coffee, you know, made sure I opened the door this way, that way. And I think that's kind of where everybody is, unless you're just kind of ignoring it. And, you know, you are where you are, and I judge not. But I've got some more questions and answers for tonight's guest from Providence College, who is a professor of biology and has had experience at the CDC. So that's nice for us. So stay tuned for that. Glad to have you aboard, or I'm glad to have you aboard. Let me just touch base on some of the political stuff that's going on right now. A headline from yesterday. So Joe Biden scores again, big in Michigan, more or less breaking the situation. If you're watching the show either at 7:30 or at midnight, you probably know by now that Bernie spoke early in the afternoon just before we got on the set. I'll talk about that after you see what the network reported about last night.
Former Vice President Joe Biden is already talking like he's won the Democratic nomination. He hasn't, but he's getting closer after winning 4 out of the 6 states voting Tuesday, with Washington still too close to call.
I want to thank Bernie Sanders and his supporters for their tireless energy and their passion. We share a common goal, and together we'll defeat Donald Trump.
Pressure within the party is expected to mount for Senator Bernie Sanders to abandon his challenge as Democrats look ahead to November. Speaking before the results were released, Sanders said he still believes he's best prepared to take on Trump.
I honestly believe that we are the strongest campaign to defeat the most dangerous president in the history. That's right.
But Biden is predicted to expand his delegate lead next week when Florida, Arizona, Illinois, and Ohio go to the polls. Both Biden and Sanders canceled planned rallies in Ohio due to the coronavirus outbreak, and their future campaign events are in question.
I've said all along that we would follow the guidance of the CDC, state and local officials, and public health officials with respect to our campaign events. We'll continue to do that.
Neither Biden nor Sanders have public events scheduled for today.
However, Bernie Sanders put out that he wanted to speak and did at 1 o'clock, and it's too early. It was too close to production time for us to get any video up for you. But basically, he did something that I thought was as sportsmanlike a political move as I've seen in a long time. He talked about, well, he's not very sportsmanlike with Donald Trump, I'll tell you that much. I mean, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punch he gave him with, you know, xenophobe, racist, this, that, and the other thing is part of his script with the president. But when it came to Joe Biden, he talked about the issues that he believes in, meaning Bernie. Then he talked about this notion of his unelectability and conceded that young people don't vote in the kind of droves that older people do, which makes it difficult for him. But he said, I'm not going to give up, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to give up my one-on-one opportunity with Joe Biden on Sunday. And if Joe Biden wants to harness my support and the support of this country, let me tell Joe Biden the questions that I'm going to be asking him. And he literally listed a half a dozen or so issues and played the role. Joe, do you believe in this? Joe, how are we going to get this? Joe, would you really veto a Medicare for all bill? Joe. And I'm listening to it thinking, this is the most effective and classy way, literally, to take an off-ramp on the campaign while trying to hold your constituency together and transfer it to Joe Biden. It's kind of like, Joe, this is yours to grab. Now, Biden is going to have a real challenge here, trying to figure out how to harness the progressive movement that Bernie Sanders, you know, is really the king of, and not give away the general election store. But the finesse of that, he's got 4 days to figure it out. Literally, it was like, you know when the teacher used to give you the questions to the test and promise you that they were the question? You were like, yeah. That's what it was. Classy, productive and probably the best way to tie the party together. I thought it was outstanding. And I am not a Bernie fan, as I think many of you know. All right, real quick, last night or yesterday, North Providence and Pawtucket did something that maybe, you know, amidst the news cycle and the virus and all of that, you might think is underwhelming, but it is not. How many times have I heard, if I had a nickel for, people telling me in the 20 years they've been here, hey, Dan, we got to consolidate. There's 39 cities and towns. We need to regionalize. Well, guess what? Here's at least the beginnings of that. North Providence and Pawtucket are going to share fire dispatch, and that could grow, not like the coronavirus speed, but it could grow across this state pretty quickly. Both mayors were pretty proud of their decision yesterday.
With this merger, we estimate a savings of approximately $234,000. $160,000 for the city of Pawtucket and $74,000 for the town of North Providence.
And we see more and more of the medical and the emergency services changing. And what we do have change and control on is these type of public services that we're going to be able to consolidate and work forward and save on time.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I actually took a quick tour of the dispatch center. Remember, the Google money that North Providence got enabled them to build a whole brand new complex, and there's reportedly room to grow, and reportedly there are another handful of towns in Rhode Island that are looking to hook into the system to save money there too. So your consolidation dream may be coming true. Here's a headline on coronavirus Rhode Island version. Now, again, we were scheduled for a noontime briefing by the Department of Health today, which was pushed back to 4 o'clock. You're probably seeing the news on that already at 7:30 at midnight. Some of the challenges of recording the show earlier in the day. But the governor is more or less saying, hey, listen, you know, we're taking advice, but we're trying to do it our way.
I'm not pursuing a copycat strategy. I'm looking at the facts. I'm listening to people on the ground, talking to teachers, talking to manufacturers, talking to employers, and we're making the best decisions for Rhode Island.
Laura Williams is a professor of biology at Providence College. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You've had CDC experience.
I do have a little bit of CDC experience, yes.
Being down there for a period of time.
Yes, yes, in Atlanta for about 1.5 years.
How big is that shop, by the way?
Oh, they're very big, yeah. It's the only federal agency that's not headquartered in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So they're down in Atlanta. That's their main campus, and that's where a lot of the public health from a federal level is done.
What's your executive summary take on the whole situation? Then I'll dig in on some of your specialty.
I think the main thing that and then I'm sure your viewers know, is it's a rapidly changing situation. We're getting updates all the time. We're getting new data. We're getting experts who are offering their opinions. Just today, there was a House Oversight Committee meeting where they said this is probably going to get worse before it gets better. And I think that's accurate, and I think that's something people should be prepared for.
We don't know what worse means, though.
That's true. We don't know what worse means. And partially that's under our control. And that's one of the reasons why these folks are saying these things, is because they're trying to get people to think about being an active participant in community health. So this situation and how worse it gets is partially what we decide to do with it.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting about this, and we'll talk about this more when we come back, but, well, duh, it's going to get worse before it gets better. I mean, 90.9999999% of America doesn't have the coronavirus, doesn't have COVID-19. What we're going to try to figure out is, what percentage actually do,
right.
And is that percentage so high that all of a sudden we replicate the process and the problems that Italy has, for instance, where hospitals are at choke point, elective surgeries are shut down, emergency issues for the other 99% of health problems are not necessarily being responded to properly. They are under it right now. Never mind the lockdown and the economic issues there.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why you'll see people talking about flattening the epidemic curve. So this is an idea where you're looking at how can we get the number of cases below a point that our healthcare system can deal with it. And so that's why you see people asking for folks who may not really be part of the vulnerable population to make decisions about things like social distancing, make decisions about travel, because we're trying to make sure that we do not overwhelm the healthcare system, because everybody's health, you know, heart attacks aren't going to go away.
Right.
We still need to be able to treat those things.
You said something really smart. We're gonna talk about that. In fact, I don't know why the CDC is not talking this way about under the curve. Stay with us. This is what the network had this morning on CDC and national response.
A coronavirus hearing with House lawmakers was cut short today, with federal health officials summoned to the White House for a meeting. Before leaving, Representative Stephen Lynch from Massachusetts demanded more honesty from federal officials.
The president on March 6th told the people in my district publicly that the tests were ready. Anybody who wants a test can go be tested. So my constituents went to their local health centers, went to their hospitals. There were no tests. Zero.
I have never, ever held back telling exactly what is going on from a public health standpoint.
Today, the president is scheduled to participate in several closed-door meetings here, including with bankers. He's trying to find ways to shore up the nation's economy in the face of the coronavirus. Tuesday, the president lobbied Republican senators on a stimulus package to ease the economic impact of the outbreak.
I was just with the Republican senators, and they were just about all there, mostly all there. And there's a great feeling about doing a lot of things.
The proposals include assistance to those without sick leave, tax relief to industries hit hardest by the outbreak, and a temporary payroll tax cut through the end of the year. That could cost up to hundreds of billions of dollars. The payroll tax supports the country's two biggest safety nets, Social Security and Medicare. The White House has given no details on how it would make up the lost revenue.
Because they don't know. That's why, because they're thrown against the wall hoping it sticks, because the president has botched the leadership communication on this. Congressman Lynch is absolutely right. I don't know if you agree, but I think it's abominable the way he has handled this situation. Thankfully, it seems like the vice president is captaining a group that, I mean, if the vice president could stop his sycophancy and just kind of talk straight as well, I think America would start to buy into the conversation. But the palpable pressure on this group of leaders, medical people, to ride the fence of trying to get the truth out and not upset, Donald J. Trump is one of the things I think history will probably reflect on and record. Do you have a thought on the politics of this whole thing that way?
I think that's very challenging. Our public health agencies, our federal agencies like the CDC and the National Institutes of Health, those are, as you said, they're medical experts, they're public health experts, but they are also federal employees. But I think those folks, especially from my experience at CDC, those are good people who work for CDC, and their interest is in, their mission is the public health.
Have you read the New York Times piece on the Senate, on Washington, and the doctor that was trying to get the tests out, They had their own version, and, Medicare, Medicaid, rigmarole, who's going to get paid for what, blah, 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 the CDC, bureaucratic, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about good people. It seems to me that we better have, when this is all done, a good post-mortem on how to have much more effective, quick reaction to this.
That I absolutely agree with you. I think there are going to be some serious questions that need to be asked after we've dealt with the immediate crisis, to ask, what happened with this diagnostic testing rollout? It was not handled well. I don't think anyone in the months to come will, hopefully no one will attempt to defend that, because that's not defensible. And why the CDC decided to develop their own test is a bit unclear. No one is really answering where that directive came from. And so now what you see is there's research labs, such as the University of Washington has developed their own test. And so you have academic labs sometimes stepping in as well to help.
Right. You got academic labs, you got CDC, and now you got private industry. And so hopefully we have the cumulative millions of tests necessary by the end of this week. But, the president made a promise for which he could not keep, suggesting he should be, it's unbelievable. And why that's not apparent to most of America right now, or perhaps it is. This notion of operating under the curve, though.
Yes.
Could you send an email to your former friends at the CDC and let them know that this is the language they ought to be using? Because your description was so clear. That's a concept that I think is relaxing to people, yet productive as a mutual goal. Okay,
right.
We want to keep this thing at a level, and do you think we still have a chance to do that?
I absolutely do, yes. But the decisions that we make in the next few days, in the next week, are going to decide whether or not we can keep that number of cases, the epidemic curve.
We who?
Under
National decision makers, local decision makers?
National decision makers, local decision makers, individual people. So each person is an active participant in community health. Each of us makes decisions about how we go about our lives and what we do. So folks are making decisions about travel. Folks are making decisions about, for instance, visiting people in long-term care facilities. And the more you can get everybody on board with understanding, like you said, we're trying to protect the capacity of the healthcare system now. We're trying to flatten that curve of number of cases.
Have you followed Italy's procedures? Some are writing that we're following an eerily similar track.
Yes.
Are you concerned about that?
I am, actually. So what those folks are talking about is looking at the exponential growth in the number of cases. And remember, these are detected cases. So we can only talk about...
The doubling factor is daily.
Correct. And so if you look at Italy and you look at the track that we're on, without any kind of interventions, we're headed that way. And so this is why we're going to probably start to see much more aggressive language from
But we're a bigger country.
Policymakers. We are.
We're a bigger country. They got 60 million. We've got 300 million. Geographically, we have a much larger spread. As somebody who tracks this stuff, we'll get into some of your biology in a second, but your acumen in this is really good. So I ask this. Having East Coast, West Coast pop up, more or less, in the middle of the country is somewhat scattered and kind of not so much. I mean, Michigan actually doesn't have a case yet, right?
I think they do now.
Did they?
And some of this again is testing.
Okay.
So as much as who you're testing and
Got
how
that.
you're testing.
But is the size of the country and kind of the polar opposite problems, New Rochelle, Washington State, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know that it's good or bad. It's just different, right? So Italy is going to have a unique situation to them. You're right. We've got we've got demographic differences. There's been indications that people who smoke might be more vulnerable. So lots of different things come into this: age, smoking, underlying conditions. Geography might play a part of it, but there's so much travel now between places that I think that if you've got community spread in a few places, you really do need to clamp that down, or it will get out into the rest of the nation.
Right, when we come back, we'll talk about the community reaction and a little bit of the biology of this, wash your hands, stay with us. All right, so all the lab stuff and whatever, your expertise in biology, I'm sure, has a lot of people asking you, what about the nature of this particular virus? I mean, is there something do you have like a blanket statement that you're offering for people to explain what the difference is between this virus and, say, the flu?
And say the flu? Yeah, so we're learning a lot about this, which is a common thing for people to say. It's novel, so this is not something we've seen exactly, this virus. We've not seen it before, but it's in a family of viruses that we have seen before. These are different from the influenza virus. So I have had people say, well, it's basically the flu. And it's not. It's a different virus. It produces different symptoms. It infects our cells using different interactions. And so the way it's going to behave in a person is going to be different from the flu. Some folks who've been now speaking to the media who've had it have said, this hit me like a train.
A ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And when it comes fast, I guess. You still supporting the 80% of Americans who get it will feel mild symptoms?
That's what the data looks like.
Are you still buying the data?
Yes, I think so.
But I'll tell you, the 2% number they were holding on to, fatality rate, seems to have crept up. World health-wise, 3.4%. In Italy, it looks like it's 6% right now.
It does, yes.
And that's a problem.
And again, that case-fatality ratio is partially under our control. So Italy's healthcare system is overwhelmed. So they are making decisions now about triage. And so if you can't get care to people who have severe cases or critical cases, they're going to be part of your fatalities.
Yeah, one of the things I think everybody is wondering about is, when do I pull the trigger and call the doctor? When do I call the when do I go to the hospital? The messages have been, even the governor and our Department of Health, I think, are doing the best they can to say the right things. But I think there is a difference of how things are being articulated and how they're received.
Sure.
You know, I know that in my business I say things thinking it's very clear, and somebody says, hey, you said this on TV the other night. I said, no, I didn't say that.
Sure.
You know, so people hear what they want to hear on how to handle this whole thing. How are you handling it? How are you recommending to your students to handle this?
Yeah.
PC still in class, by the way?
PC is on break.
Okay.
PC is on break at the moment.
Coming back to class?
That's currently
being evaluated.
They're assessing that. So there's a task force that's looking at, again, everything's changing quickly.
Yeah.
So they're meeting and looking at information and making decisions. And of course, we're thinking about that, the health of students as they're coming back onto campus. And so they'll be kind of reevaluating that as they go.
Do you have a feeling about what the apex of this whole thing is?
It's hard to say. And again, that comes down so much to control measures, mitigation measures, trying to figure out, you know, and that again comes back down to individual people making choices.
On the biology of this, do you buy into this hope that warm weather is a mitigating factor?
I've wondered about that, and I've been looking especially to see what folks are saying. We have other coronaviruses that are seasonal, that just cause common cold type symptoms or some gastrointestinal symptoms, and those are seasonal. They'll go away during warm weather. But then the other two coronaviruses that we know of that kind of became epidemic are not necessarily seasonal. So it's hard to say with this one. So we can't make a good prediction yet.
Do coronaviruses generally have an expiration? Do they burn themselves out, or do they refuel on their own?
So the 4 that we kind of circulate seasonally as common colds, those are with us. They're pretty much now, you could kind of consider them endemic. The original SARS in 2002, 2003, we haven't really seen that much anymore. And so I think that's very interesting. So was it control measures? Where did that virus go? And we'd love to replicate that. But again, it's decisions happening now.
You don't know what the story this virus is writing for itself.
No. And we're authors on this too. So it comes down to decisions that are going to get made by us. The virus is
so
doing
you're not
its thing.
sure. You're really not sure about how this thing is going to play. But it seems to me, I'm hearing very clearly, that we have as much to do with it as the intrinsic biological species itself. Correct?
Yes. So one of the things I always tell my microbiology students is that there's a lot of debate about whether viruses are living or not, and they're really just a very simple organism. And we're the ones with all the complexity that comes down to, is it going to spread? How far is it going to spread? How can we treat people who get it? And all of that is all factors that we have control over.
10 seconds here. Bottom line, don't not take it seriously.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't not take it seriously.
Yes.
But don't freak out.
Don't panic, but think carefully about what your role can be.
You're a great resource. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Final word when we come back. I think that was pretty informative. I love this notion of operating under that curve, and again, we have as much to do with that curve as actually it seems to be we are the ones that will determine what the curve is. So I think that's fascinating and something that you ought to mention to somebody else immediately. Keep washing your hands. Don't touch your face. We'll get through this. There will be a golf season. See you tomorrow.